Welcome to the Purple Kurt podcast. I'm your host, Kurt Hoffman. With me today, I have special guest Frank Bures. Frank Bures is an award-winning writer. Ooh, let me start that over again. Frank Bures. This is the day after Halloween, folks, so I'm still a little tongue-tied from the trick. We had about 400 trick-or-treaters last night. Frank is an award-winning writer and essayist. He's editor of the book, the cover behind me here, Under Purple Skies, the Minneapolis Anthology, which collects some of the best writing about Minneapolis. There's some wonderful essays. We'll get to that in just a moment or two. He is also the author of The Geography of Madness, Penis Thieves, Voodoo Death, and the Search for Meaning of the World's Strangest Syndromes, which Newsweek called one of the best travel books of the decade. Apart from giving tours of his hometown, Bures has also tracked down genital thieves in Nigeria, gone on Sasquatch expeditions in the Northwoods, and competed in the World Rock Skipping Championships on the Great Lakes. He is a Minneapolis. He is a Minnesota native, lives in Minneapolis, and speaks several languages. And also, we're going to talk first about the fact that he has a Prince walking tour, which is available on the Voice Map app. Frank, welcome to the Purple Kurt podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's wonderful. Well, this has been in the works for a couple months. So a little bit of background about how Frank and I got to know one another. Journalist Neil Carlin, who I got to meet earlier in the summer when I went to visit and do my Minneapolis tour, finally doing a tour of Paisley Park Studios. I got to hang with Neil and have coffee. About a month or two later, I get an email from Frank. And it's like, hey, you're friends with Neil Carlin. I have a Voice Map app tour of a Prince walking tour. I'd like you to get your feedback on it. So several months of false starts and trying to get you on and trying to get me to have the time to get you on. Here we are. So can you give us a little bit of background about your relationship to Minneapolis and Prince, Frank?
Yeah, sure, of course. So I'm from Minnesota originally, and grew up not in Minneapolis, in southeastern Minnesota, on a town on the Mississippi River. And my mom is from the Twin Cities, and so my grandma lived here, and we would come up all the time. And so I kind of knew it from that, and then I went to college just south of the Twin Cities, so we would come in all the time to Minneapolis for things. And the relationship of Minneapolis to the rest of the state is pretty strong. There's, like every place, there's sort of tension between the Twin Cities and the outstate, but there's everybody in Minnesota basically has to come to Minneapolis at some point, because it's just such a central hub, and it's a huge part of the economy and everything. And so everybody knows it, and it's also just a great city. And so when my wife and we lived out in Portland for a while, and then we're wanting to move back to the Midwest. We lived for a little bit in Madison, Wisconsin, and then ultimately decided to come back up here, and it's been great. It's really just a great city. It's kind of medium sized, but it's got a amazing arts and culture sector, and lots of stuff to do. A great food scene. A local chef just won the James Beard Award for best restaurant for his restaurant called Owami, I think is how you pronounce it. It's like a
Japanese?
No, it's Native American themed restaurant right on the Mississippi River. Yeah, Sean Sherman is the chef. And so anyway, there's a lot of things like that we love about Minneapolis. There's a lot of great stuff to do, and just the writing scene is really amazing too. Like my next door neighbor is a woman named Kelly Barnhill, who she is in a couple weeks going to New York. She's on the short list for the National Book Award, and so.
Oh my God! Wow.
So there's all kinds of stuff like that, and we really like it here. And I I've been a freelance writer for 25 years, and knew a guy who from travel writing from South Africa, who started this company called Voice Map, and he reached out to me and see if I wanted to put one together, and I looked at it, and is, you know, I'm not a huge technology guy, so I wasn't 100% sure that people would actually buy the tour and, and experience it, but I agreed to do one, and just as a kind of experiment, and to see, I thought it could be cool. There's some cool stuff you could do with like the form, and so I put together a walking tour on the Mississippi River. It's called Mississippi River Walk,
Hmm.
and it's just kind of a general fun, like, trivia about Minneapolis, and kind of going across the river and stuff, and that actually turned out really well, and people started downloading it and using it and liking it, and so that sort of got me to thinking about other tours, and
Sure.
it kind of occurred to me that there are all these sites associated with Prince. Some of them are not downtown, but a lot of them are downtown, and people walk around all the time and they don't even know that's there. And so that's one of the great things about these audio tours, that you can kind of connect history with the present in a sort of immediate way. And so I thought it would be really cool to do that with Prince, and some of the places that he used for movie scenes, and played music venues, and places that meant a lot to him too, because I wasn't like the hugest Prince fan. I was more of like a normal Prince fan. I grew up in the
Got it.
80s, and we all listened to Purple Rain like a million times, and just it was
Sure.
always playing. And Prince was the just kind of the soundtrack of our youth. And so when he died in 2016, I found myself like weirdly shook up about it, and I didn't couldn't I would like just get all teary at weird times, and it was really moving for some reason. And I saved all these papers from that week, when he died. Like, I have this
Oh,
one,
wow.
the
Oh,
Bridge of
wow. Okay.
Majesty, and I have like the papers from like the whole week, and I just can't get myself to throw them away.
Oh,
Um,
no, don't. Please don't. Yeah.
yeah,
Archive
like,
those. Please. Yeah, absolutely.
no, I know I have this one. This one's really cool. This is
Oh, wow. Oh, that's a beautiful photo, too.
in the Star Tribune. Yeah, that's awesome. And then here's our old city pages. That was there.
Oh, I love show and tell, Frank. This is beautiful. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
have all these papers from like that whole week. He dominated the headlines like every
I
day
think I
for that
actually have.
week,
Did that
and
one? Yeah. Did that one from the city pages come out? When did that come out?
this is April 27th to May 3rd. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
like a week or
Right,
so
right in
there.
that timeline. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But this one came out like the day of, and it's just like uh it's just a cover for
That's an
the
iconic photo too from the Purple Rain
yeah.
tour. That's an
Yeah, it's
iconic
really
photo.
awesome. And so I don't know, I found like
Hmm.
for a few years I just kept these things, and I kept thinking about it, and knew I wanted to do something with it, or write something about it, because it felt like a kind of a powerful piece of our history, and my
Absolutely.
history, and all this stuff. And so I thought, and I couldn't really think of anything I wanted to like write like a story about it, but this audio tour was a really great chance to write a bunch of different things, and
Hmm.
research Prince, and his connection to the city, and to like those of us who grew up in the 80s, what kind of it meant to us. And the way the audio tour is put together, it's actually like kind of a a series of essays, basically, that you sort of arrange into a narrative form, or that feels like a narrative form. So you're kind of telling an overall story. in a way with a lot of like smaller stories. So it was kind of a cool way, I thought, to do that, and to sort of explore like what Prince meant to the city, what Prince meant to me, what Prince meant to like our generation, and to everybody, and to the Midwest too, which is
Sure.
something we can also talk about. So that's kind of how the tour came about, and it took. I worked on it for a long, long time, researching, because you have to figure out the sites, and then you have to figure out which stories will go with the sites,
Sure.
and then compose like the kind of essay that will go with that site, and
Yeah.
then also fit it to the amount of time somebody will be walking from this point to this point. And so it's a really complex
Yeah.
process, but I think I feel like it turned out pretty well. So, and people seem to be liking it.
Oh, let me interject and tell you, because you gave me a copy of it, and I appreciate it, to preview. And I will say, as somebody who is more than a casual fan, you did your homework and you did what. In fact, I learned something listening to the audio tour, and I'm sure many hardcore fans might find something in there they didn't know. Um,
Yeah. Well,
it's a
thank.
night to put. Well, yeah, you're welcome. But I mean, and you know, I'm of course going to plug everything you've got and going on, related to Prince and beyond that. But as somebody who, as just being objective, there are a couple of references I listened to, and I laughed at your description of Paisley Park, and I'll let the listeners find that one out for themselves. I laughed out loud. I'm like, you know, you had your own sense of humor, and not trying to be reverent the whole time to Prince.
Mhm.
You definitely have a sense of reverence throughout the walking tour. Let me just put that out. But there are
Yeah.
moments where you give a little humorous reference to, you know the description of the design of Paisley Park and some other things that are just snuck in there, and your sense of humor comes through. But the one that I didn't realize was that he was bused to this special performing arts place where he took dance classes. That I actually did not know. I mean, I know he was a fan of dance and all that, but that part, I don't claim to be the super fan of all super fans who knows every time he
Mhm.
coughed or sneezed or, everything like that, because there are people who are on a whole other level. But there is something for everybody here, casual and beyond. And to
Yeah.
have to edit that into a 90-minute walking tour format, what do you put in and what do you leave out? That's probably the hardest
Yeah. Yeah.
decision that you make, and you're editing. You are an
Mhm.
editor because this Under Purple Skies book you have here, so you do have editing skills. But when you couple that with technology,
Mhm.
and you're doing a visual component on top of it, married to an audio and written form, that
Yeah.
takes quite a bit. How long did it take? Now, did you record it in a studio, or did you record it from home?
I had, at that point, I had kind of an office that I was renting that was pretty quiet, and so I was able to do you put the blanket over your head and record. I have a decent field recorder that I was
Okay.
able to use, and
Uh-huh.
which turned out pretty good. But VoiceMap also has actual editors who, so I
Oh,
would
okay.
submit my script to VoiceMap, and my editor would be like, "Oh, this is too long. You need to cut this down, blah blah blah." And then I once the text, and then it goes into like a beta testing where
Uh-huh.
it's like a robot voice, automatic voice. It reads it, and so you go and make sure all the points are triggering, and then I recorded the script and then resubmitted it, and then I go and test it again to make sure everything is working. And so my editor, VoiceMap, does more of like the leveling and stuff like that. I
Sure.
just did basically the writing, the script, and recording and stuff, and that end of things.
So, from soup to nuts, Frank, how long did that take until the finished product, from the start of it to the finish? Couple months?
Well, I wouldn't say I wasn't working on it like constantly, but probably like a
Okay.
year.
Okay. Off and on. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. For me anyway, it's a long process, just because I want it to be good. I want that, like, the experience of the person to be really, fun and interesting, and like, and moving also, to so that I can
No,
take something
com-
away.
I completely wholeheartedly endorse the walking tour. And for all you, it's $7.99. It's like you get for $7.99, you get a detailed filled fact filled tour, areas, like for some of us who have visited more than once. I went in 2016 without your guidance, obviously.
Hmm.
There are areas like the Glam Slam Club, which used to be was a Western club before it turned back to that. I think it's, the building's 110 or whatever it is.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
a
yeah.
Western bar in 2016 when I had visited. So there are some updates in your walking tour for those of us who have been there before, or if this is going to be your first time. He recently put this thing up in June of 2022.
Hmm.
Funny enough,
Hmm.
that the week that I was visiting. So had I known that this tour existed, I definitely would have gotten it, because I have seen Nicollet Mall, but I might not have known all the details about when the building was built and all
Hmm.
that, and the little things that you throw in there. And you start, basically the start of the tour is by the famous statue of Mary Tyler Moore, the old famous 70s television show.
Right, right.
Fun, God, those reruns, that the show still holds up today. It really does. It's so funny.
Yeah,
And but
yeah.
that's Mary Tyler Moore throwing her hat, because that's what she would do in the opening montage of
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
show. And you start there. So there's another, Minnesota iconic
Yeah.
figurehead there. Not just Prince, but you get little Minnesota, Minneapolis things along the way, that
Hmm.
add
Hmm.
add to the tour. That I mean, I knew of it. I didn't know where the statue was. I'll
Yeah,
be
yeah, yeah,
admit, I'll admit
yeah.
it. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no,
Fantastic.
before, I mean, other than Prince, she was kind of the famous,
Oh
like,
yeah.
before Prince, that's what everybody not from Minnesota associated with Minneapolis.
Right, right, right. So with that, folks, I'll have a link in the description below of this recording of this episode, and I encourage you to go on there. If you're a friends of mine on Facebook page, Kurt Hoffman on Facebook, I have a post and a link directly take you to the Voice Map app. It's worth getting, and perhaps we'll get another walking tour of Chanhassen, maybe perhaps,
Yeah,
or areas like that. A
more
sequel,
of
a
a
sequel, if
driving
you will.
tour in Chanhassen.
Oh, a driving tour would be great. Now that could be something Voice Map F. I'm going to get oh, I would love it. I mean, I
Yeah,
know there are other tours you can go on, and but
there are, and there are a lot of different Prince tours you can go on, like in-person tours. That mine
yep,
is really centered in downtown, like places you can walk to.
perfect,
There's
which is
other
perfect.
places, there's a lot of other sites that you can go to, like Electric Fetus, the record store that
That
Prince
yep,
loved, still there.
mhm,
Still, it's like
yep.
kind of, Neil was wanting me to put that in, but it's like, it's just like a little bit too far for walking, but it's not that far from downtown if you can get there. And then
No, it's not. No, it's not.
there's the house from Purple Rain, the
Yep.
exterior that's, I
Mhm.
think, still owned by the Prince Estate, that I
It
bike
is.
by,
He
like.
bought it. He bought it actually. I think a couple years before he died, he officially bought it under his. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's still there. I bike by it like
Yep.
once a
Yep.
week. It's not
Oh
too far from
wow.
my house.
Yep. I
Yeah,
didn't visit it the last time I went in June, but I did see it with my own eyes. I figured once is fine.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not that
You, you
much.
you do, if you've never been to Minneapolis, you do have to go see the Purple Rain home. His
Hmm.
childhood home where he grew up with Andre Simone, both his boyhood homes that he
Yeah,
lived
those are
with.
still there. Yeah,
Yep,
there's a book that I thought was pretty good called Purple Rain, Reign, that
I
by
have it.
by a British guy that has all the addresses and stuff in it. So if you want to like go check it out on
Yeah,
your own, you can get the addresses from that. And
yeah. It's out of print. I think. I don't think it's still in print. I bought it when it
oh,
came out in
really?
the '90s. Yeah, I don't know.
You might be able to
Frank, I'll
get a
have to look.
used copy on Amazon or something. But
Yeah, I
like,
mean, I have it, but I'm sure people out there can find it.
Yeah, and the Paisley Park tour obviously is I thought really good. It was really fun and moving.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. I believe Tammy was my tour guide when I went there. Uh,
Mhm.
they offered me a job there. I have to tell you,
Yeah.
because I added just a couple of things after she had done her spiel about this, that, and the other thing, and pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you consider doing this part time during the summer or something like that? Because you seem to know a lot about." So you never know, Frank. You might have me as a temporary summer neighbor, be my version of summer music camp, like Camp Paisley Park, right? So I
That'd
would
be
love that.
great.
I would. Let me tell you, I would. That would be my retirement job. I'll do that during the summers. That would be my summer.
Yeah, come on
Maybe
out.
someday. Oh, I would love it. I would love it. But it's all these different things are well worth it. Um, and you mentioned about culinary arts and stuff like that, because I know when people, now that, our first Prince celebration in person happened this year, and some people had gotten COVID, and, I don't think it turned out to be an unmitigated disaster, but there was a little bit of, bumps along the way. I Hopefully that's probably going to settle itself out for next summer. I understand it went very well. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Was that at
you
Paisley
meant
Park?
it was at Paisley, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
They had some special guests. I know Mark was there with members of Maserati. The NPG got back together and reproduced live, kind of like what Paul McCartney was doing with Get Back, where he had John Lennon's vocals and stuff isolated and performed with Prince from a Glam Slam show in the 90s. And they recreated some of the dance moves. The
Oh,
band
that's right.
played live
Yeah,
behind him. Yeah.
I read about
Yeah.
that.
Hopefully they'll continue more of that. I know they just had a Halloween show at Paisley Park too, so it seems to be quite active that they're
Hmm.
doing performances, jazz shows. I know that St. Paul, the Minneapolis Funk All Stars was there.
Yeah.
I mean, the Supper Club. I know there's all these different places that you could go see shows. Minnesota Music Cafe. Um,
Hmm.
every
Hmm.
Wednesday night, Jelly Bean Johnson, when he's in town, plays there with um, JB and the Routine. I mean, it's a very vibrant scene. It really is.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's not that hard to get around Minneapolis. I mean, I live near the Philadelphia area and used to live. It kind of reminds me of Baltimore a little bit in terms of its size.
Hmm.
It's very easily navigatable, GPS friendly. You
Yeah.
know, so I
There's
really I
also
highly recommend it.
there was a story in our paper recently about
Hmm.
I can't remember which one, Jimmy Jam or Terry Lewis, one of their dads, is like
Uh-huh.
still performing. He's like 90 and
Hmm.
plays
Oh
like
yeah.
every week at I think Palmer's Bar or something like that. Um,
Hmm.
so if he's still around, you can go see him.
There's another club in, oh God, it's owned by First Avenue, and I can't remember the name of it. Dr. Fink accompanies a young lady. I believe her name is Olivia Russa,
Hmm.
Roosa, and I think he plays once one Thursday of the month, the first
The-
Thursday of the month or something like that. There's just all these different. I mean, the Dakota Jazz Club.
It's not
We
the
could go
Seventh
on, and
Street entry, is it?
it's not Seventh Street Entry, but it's another club that they own in St. Paul.
Oh,
It's not the
okay.
Minnesota Music Cafe. It's something else. It's in my go to my podcast episode with Dr. Fink. He talks
Okay,
about
yeah,
it. He actually talks about 100 different things. That guy's got a walking encyclopedia of, oh, if you like this, go to here. If you like that.
yeah.
So
Hmm.
so you beyond beyond the book tour, of course, behind me we have this wonderful Minneapolis anthology book entitled, as you can see, Under Purple Skies, which you were the editor for. And our
Hmm.
dear friend Neil Carlin has a reprint of the Art Rolling Stone article that he first did for Prince,
Hmm.
about Prince, and interviewed him.
Yes.
And but I wanted to highlight, since you had mentioned it to me in an email, that there's this essay print. Well, the green screen's gonna make it, but it's Prince of the Midwest, and it's by a dear friend of yours, Michael Perry, who's from Wisconsin. And if you
Mhm.
don't mind, I'm going to read the first paragraph, because it kind of hits home to a lot of us of a certain era. So you'd never dream it looking at me all doughy, bald and crumpling in my 50s, but I owe the sublimated bulk of my aesthetic construct to Prince Rogers Nelson circa Purple Rain. The film and album were released the summer after my fresh off the farm freshman year in college. I sat solo through the movie a minimum of 4 times, wore the hubs off the soundtrack cassette, draped my bedroom with purple scarves, stocked the dresser top with fat candles, and scotch tape fishnet to the drywall above the bed. Intended to create a seductive shadows of mystery, it wound up a pointless cobweb. And considering it's the day after Halloween, I thought that was pretty fitty, a
Yeah.
paragraph to read. But that's just the first paragraph there. He's got a very this and other stories and poems
Hmm.
are has a wonderful flavor to it, and I recommend people to also get it. I got my copy off of Amazon. Um,
Hmm.
so
Yeah. Yeah, that book came about. I had
yeah,
been working a little bit with Ann Trubeck, who edits Belt, the
Bell
publishing house,
Publications.
and
Mhm.
also a website with a kind of magazine and stuff. And she had reprinted a story of mine that had gone out of print about Richard, Florida, um, from a
Mhm.
while ago, and I had talked to her because I knew they were doing this city and by city anthology, and asked her if
Mhm.
they were planning to do Minneapolis, which is kind of a little bit out on the edge of their territory as far as the Rust Belt goes. But she said, well, if you'll edit it, we'll do it. And so I
Wow.
had to kind of think about it, but ultimately it just seemed like a great way to kind of showcase some of the
Yep.
writing that we have here and some of the amazing talent, and just like create something that would sort of like capture this moment of the city and the narrative of the city and stuff. And so a friend, Jason Albert, who's a friend of mine who has a piece in here, he actually helped me quite a
Mhm.
bit put it together. And we sort of went through um sorry, we sort of went through like area by area and looked at what we thought were the important things that represented Minneapolis that we needed to have. And so it was like, sorry, something about the river. We had tried to get stuff about like the food scene, a lot of different sports, and
Yeah.
uh, just a lot of different very basically areas where Minneapolitans kind of self-identify as like this is what we sort of do. And obviously Prince is one of those things. We had to
Of
have
course. Yeah.
Prince in here, and we could have had even more, but we didn't. There was just we didn't want to have too much Prince, because then it would be like the Prince anthology rather than the Minneapolis anthology. But
Yeah, it's refreshing that it's not, because there's even though your friend there wrote about Purple Rain and stuff like that, he has his own background story. I mean, he really puts a lot into that short that story about himself and the
yeah.
flavor of how he grew up and stuff. So, but there's other poetry. There's the lamenting of places that have closed down. There
Hmm.
there are tons of stories that are not directly Prince related, and that's the great thing about it. It's not just going to be all about Prince, though. That's what you're going to come to initially for the book. Let's be honest, a lot of
Hmm.
Prince fans are going to see it and go, "Oh, I want to get that," but you're going to get a lot more than just
Yeah,
Prince
yeah,
related. You're going to
yeah.
get
I
the
we
flavor of where Prince grew up.
right, right, right. So I had talked to him about it, and I could tell from the way he talked about Prince that there was something sort of meaningful there, that he'd written a tiny bit about it in a book of his, and I knew there was, but I had this feeling there was more there. And so I asked him if he wanted to write this essay, and he did, and it just turned out awesome. He's a really amazing writer. But for that, with that particular piece, why I really like that, one of the reasons is because it really spoke to what Prince did for a lot of people in the Midwest. Because there's this long-standing sort of narrative of like if you want to sort of make it big, you have to kind of leave and go to LA or New York or something like
Right,
that.
right.
There's definitely a more than there's definitely kind of an inferiority complex in the Midwest with like the coasts and what we can kind of do here. And Prince just didn't have any of that, and he he created this whole thing, here just, and it's a mystery and it's amazing to me. And it's like I have so much respect for him, but he like created this sort of world out of nothing,
Yep.
not out of nothing, because there is
Well,
like
yeah.
a great music scene and lots of talent and stuff, but he was
Yeah.
able to sort of marshal it in such a way that, combining with his own ideas and his own
Hmm.
creativity, just and also to hit a certain moment in the culture, where it just like resulted in this kind of supernova, of talent and celebrity and everything. And it was just like amazing. But anyway, the point is that Prince kind of showed, I think, people that you can do great stuff here. You don't have to necessarily
Yep.
leave, and you can, what you can imagine, the narratives that you can kind of imagine for yourself are are possible, if you can figure out a way to do it. And so that was kind of why I like that piece. Um, and then obviously we had Neil let us excerpt his
Hmm.
1985 Rolling Stone story, which was
Still
the
holds
first
up.
interview with Prince, and he like rode around with Prince in North Minneapolis and went to look at his old house in Prince's Thunderbird. And it's such a great scene. It really captures Minneapolis at that time. I just was really happy to have that in there. And then I also wanted to find like a poem, and I spent a fair amount of time looking for poems about Prince, and I found the one that we ended up putting in there by Luisa Moriadan, who she first came came across Prince when she's from Ukraine, and their family like
Oh, right, right, right,
bought,
right, right.
bought a bootleg copy of Purple Rain there, and they thought it was like science fiction. It was like so futuristic, and we're just like mesmerized by it. And then later they came to the America, and she said that became their soundtrack for assimilation. And that poem, I just love that poem, and she actually recorded it for me so I could put it in her voice in the
Yes.
tour. And it just like every time I listen to that, it just like gives me chills. It's just
Yeah.
such a great poem.
She's in Ukraine currently.
No, she's here. She teaches here and writes here. So
What
yeah.
about her? Does she still have family over there? Because immediately, with all that's going on in Ukraine, that's the first thing that pops up in my mind. If she
Yeah, I don't
has
know.
family,
I haven't talked to her since like last year before all that started. So I'm sure I would be very surprised if she didn't have family there and is not thinking about that all the time. But
of course,
but
of
uh
course.
but yeah, yeah, yeah. But anyway, I think most of her family moved here as well. Um, there's also another poem that I really wanted to include, but it was a little bit long, and like the Luisa's poem is kind of short and tight and worked well in the anthology. But this other one
Right.
is called The Will of a Prince by Ed Bok Lee, who's a great poet from Minneapolis. I can put a
Okay.
link to it in the chat if you um
Text
it
and text me that link also. I'll put that in the if you don't
okay.
mind, I'll put that in the description too. Thank
Yeah,
you.
but
Boy,
it's
this is
all
great,
it's
man.
all it's all told, the poem is all told in like um so
Oh,
Prince supposedly didn't leave a will, and it's like him it's like in Prince's voice, like willing all these things to different people, to his piano, to like the legacy of sound, to Minneapolis, to
right.
his charismatic gaze. I don't know. It's just like
Hmm.
it's such a great poem.
Oh, to check it out. And I think about that whole Prince having a will or not having a will thing because Neil contests that he, in fact, helped to write a will for Prince, and it's buried somewhere around Paisley Park. And where has that gone?
Yes, I know. I read that same
That's the
thing.
bone of contention, right? So,
Yeah.
where the hell is it, Paisley Park? Where the hell is it, estate? I mean, really, if he did or if he didn't, if it ever got buried under there or not,
I
you know,
mean, who knows? I mean, obviously,
I mean,
Neil says he wrote it, and so it must exist somewhere. I mean, that would be very on brand to dig it up in like 20 years.
yeah. Well, hey, yeah, I don't want to speculate because I don't know anything. I mean, I'm just a, just a mere fan. But no, it is interesting how all these different poets and writers, people, family from the Ukraine, all these disparate elements
Hmm.
around the globe, and you being a fairly well uh, uh, tenured world traveler yourself, you've been around everywhere. You could live, pretty much anywhere you want, and
Hmm.
but you decided to come back home to Minnesota. You decided to come back to Minnesota.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
drew
yeah.
you the most to come, other than was it other than family? What drew you back to Minnesota? Just because it's home, or
Yeah, it was a lot. Family. My wife's also from Minnesota, and we have, kids who are now teenagers, and it was
yeah?
a good place for them to grow up as far as, just having decent schools, and also like just being in a city that is not too big, but it has like enough cultural stuff to keep you busy, and enough of an art scene and a writing scene, and good economy and stuff, and just like the amount of natural amenities too here is really
Hmm.
amazing. We have the Mississippi River like a mile from our house. I can go canoe there, and go down the river, and it's actually technically a national park too, like going right through the middle of the city. And there's lakes, and I can bike most of the year. I can bike pretty much anywhere. So
I
it's
mean,
just
it's
a
amazing.
really livable city, and also enough like cool, interesting stuff to do. Great museums and great
Oh,
theater,
yeah.
and all that stuff.
Oh, when I was in town, Frank, I stayed in the Golden Valley area, and not terribly far from where I stayed. I was able to run a trail, the Three Rivers Trail, I believe it's called.
Yeah.
And out of nowhere, I'm running through this amazing, kind of reminds me where I live here in Pennsylvania, where we're so near all these different running trails. I'm 20 minutes away from Valley Forge Park,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
oh my God, if you ever get this way, that's got to be one of your stops. Take the kids, take the wife. It's stunning. And but this Three Rivers Trail, I'm running along, I'm like, wow, this is just like a little gem,
Mhm,
a place. It
mhm.
just reminded me where I live. But folks, there's a lot more than just Prince, obviously, to want to drive you to that. Unless you can't handle difficult winters, go in the summertime. We can talk
Yes.
about those cold winters for a second. You get some pretty cold ones.
Well, I think Prince said that cold keeps the bad people
Keeps
out.
the bad people out. Keeps the bad people. Well, there you go. You know, keeps the strong people. It keeps the strong. You got to be tough to live around there too. You
Right.
got to
Yeah.
you got to have a tough exterior. Know how to layer up. I suppose.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I recommend this book highly. Like I said, it's not just Prince themed, but there's essays and poems that, of course, are dedicated to Prince.
Hmm.
So please check that out. Check it out. Now I'm going to change the look here to get to your other book. I mean, I had no idea about this book, but we're going to put this on here. So this book here, folks, um, when you come to the podcast episode, you're coming for the print stuff. When you've had the walking tour in your ears, which I just want to mention, the walking tour, brief second, you can listen to that walking tour without having to ever leave your house from wherever you live. You can literally preview the tour, listen
Hmm.
to it chapter by chapter, and kind of pregame your walking tour before you even set foot in Minneapolis, which is really nice.
Well, there's also
Like,
photos. When you do
yes,
the tour
yes,
virtually, there's photos of the places, and some of other photos of like Paisley Park and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. That's
Part of
actually
so
very
you can
nice.
like kind of have a experience of it to a certain extent if you're
The
not
the
there.
one yeah, the one photo you have inside Paisley Park Studio in the control room, I stood right in that spot. So it just took me back to listening to
Mm-hmm.
the two track. They played the two-track audio of two tracks. I think it was Rock and Roll Love Affair and The Breakdown. They had a cappella vocals from The Breakdown, and I stood right in that area hearing it blaring over these Westlake audio speakers. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
like chills. I just get chills. But folks, stick around for Prince. But then you want to further investigate Frank uh, and this book right here behind me, The Geography of Madness. And yeah, you look at the title of the book and you're going, okay, penis, what the hell is this all about? But it's really how to describe this book. Well, I'll let you describe it. Obviously, you wrote it. But my takeaway from the book, and I'm more than halfway through reading it. As like I said, I've been trying to get back into reading and weaning myself off of just listening to podcasts, as I told you before we recorded.
Mm-hmm.
That you are quite the world traveler. You were motivated to go to visit in Africa. You went to Nigeria in Lagos,
Mm-hmm.
I believe, correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually speak a little Yoruban myself. Having taught elementary music school, there used to be a song we used to teach the kids. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah, Ise Oluwa, I believe. Song.
Nice.
And you paint a vivid portrayal of you did a journalistic type investigation of these different cultural phenomenon that are indigenous to these particular areas that you visited. I guess that's the
Mm-hmm.
best way to for me to sum it up. But there's a little more to that where you have your background between you and your wife and having your first kid, wanting to visit these different areas, and your ties into Minnesota. But
Mm-hmm.
so give us a little bit of background about Geography of Madness if you don't.
Yeah, so that book was just born out of some questions I had. Like
Mm-hmm.
uh I was an exchange student in Italy, and went and
Mm-hmm.
taught English in Tanzania and East Africa, and my wife and I lived in Thailand, and so I had these kind of cross-cultural experiences, and I knew kind of what that feels like, or what it's like to be immersed in another culture and language and stuff, and how everything just kind of feels different. And just I've always been fascinated by culture, and how powerful it is to shape your sort of the feeling of things, and the way things go and the way you think they should go. And so I around in 2005, I think I started seeing a couple stories on the BBC about penis thieves in certain parts of Nigeria, where somebody would accuse somebody of stealing a penis like magically, and and then they would be lynched by a crowd. And the actual penis stealing was not to me as interesting as the crowd lynching. Like the fact that nobody doubted, so many people would not doubt that this is possible, that to me that spoke of like, this is the world that people live in. Like everybody knows this is true, everybody knows this is possible, everybody knows this is like a
Right.
danger. And so like that's the fabric of of the world that people are living in, regardless of whether or not the logistics of the penis theft itself. So I just thought, I really, when I wanted to do a story where I went and asked people, what is that like? What is it like to live in this world? What is it like to be in this world, where these things are possible? And so I tried to sell that story to a few magazines. Like I actually had a conversation with Bob Guccione
Mhm.
Jr., about it.
Oh,
And
wow. Not a slouch
and
there.
because he had a magazine, like a men's magazine called Gear, and he was
Oh,
kind of,
yeah.
he was a little bit on board about it, but then he didn't want to. He and his managing editor didn't want to send me just to find like nothing, to find that it's like not true. And I didn't really know how to explain that. I wasn't really like wanting to be like, is this true or not true? I sort of more wanted to write about like the culture basically that, you know,
Sure.
this comes out of. And so so I ended up just, when my wife was pregnant, you know, I was like kind of had this panic moment, like I am not going to be able to do this story after we have a kid. And so
It's right.
I did this
So,
like last minute trip and just kind of patched it together and went to Lagos, and I had some connections with some writer friends there, or writer friends who had friends there who kind of hooked me up with some people to talk to. And fortunately it was all like journalists, so they sort of knew the stories and knew what was going on, and were able to steer me kind of in the right direction. And I spent like
Good.
3 or 3.5 weeks there, just sort of poking around and talking to people and asking people's questions about it and things like that. And I actually ended up talking to kind of two people about who had had this happen to them, in a roundabout way. Uh, um, and it was just, it was really fascinating for me, and also to feel like, you know, it was really interesting. Like the more people you talk to who say like, at first they'll be like, oh no, this is ridiculous, you know, this doesn't happen. And then if you talk to them a little while, they're like, well, I maybe know somebody who it might have happened to, or and then after a few more drinks, I'll be like, actually, this happened to my uncle, you know, I know it's true, it's absolutely true.
Right.
And and it was, for me, it was really interesting how like the more people you talk to who you like respect, who you think are like smart people, the 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 more you start to like, the more the belief becomes like kind of real, or kind of feels like, oh, maybe there is something to this, you know, like, or maybe you start to like move into that world in a way. And uh and so then I was able to, I came back and actually tried for a few more years to sell the story, and I ultimately ran it in Harper's in like 2008, like 3 years after I went. And then a few years after that, I got a note from a publisher who wanted to know if I wanted to make a book of it. And so then I was able to kind of um, use that story and then put some other new stuff on. I went to China to investigate a place where it happened similarly with a different kind of story behind it. Um, and just, but the point of the book is actually to like, there's 2 points. One is to ask what, you know, what is culture actually, you know, because we all talk about it. We all like know it's a powerful thing. We all know it's something sort of real. But nobody, there's really no good definition of what it is. You know, I talk to even people who are in
Hmm.
cultural studies who try to come up with a definition of this. Nobody has a definition of it. Nobody can say like, okay, this says culture, these are the parts of it, this is what makes it up. And so that was kind of one of my missions to just figure that out for myself, like what is this thing. And then also the second part of that is how it affects us, you know, how it, you know, what it means, what it, how it gets into our, even into our biology, you know, to a certain extent, you know, based on the things you believe and the way those beliefs can affect your physiology. And you know, the definition that I kind of landed on was that, you know, culture is, for me, this is my definition, is that, you know, culture is like the narrative ecosystem that you and a group of people share. It's like the stories that you and some group of people think are real or possible or true, you know. And to the extent that you all agree that these are the stories that can happen, that's like a culture.
Frank, I tell you, and it's fascinating. And when I read it through, I thought about our own American culture, things that we have here. For instance, I thought immediately of the Catholic Church and the fact that there is a belief of some people, not all Catholics believe this certainly, but demonic possession and exorcism came
Hmm.
immediately to my mind. And that is considered valid in a lot of different cultures all across the world. Obviously, Catholic Church spread its missionary through missionary expeditions, spread this throughout the world, and there are people who wholeheartedly believe that people can be possessed by the devil, and that you get a priest who is specifically involved in an exorcism. What's the
Mhm.
difference between that and these penis thieves in terms of psychological cultural phenomena? To me, I was like, well, there
Yeah.
are people who believe in that. Why can't this be a valid,
No, it's
you
a
know?
it's a tricky line to walk when you talk about these
Right.
things, because you don't want to, and you can't really say that's not true. Like, I mean, you can, but it's also not that interesting to me as a writer and an artist, because to somebody who's experiencing this, it is 100% true, and or it feels true to somebody who is experiencing possession or whatever, that feels like so true. You coming in from the outside and being like, oh, this is not real. It's just like it's just not that interesting, and it's kind of rude and culturally inappropriate and whatever. But
And not
um
just and dismissive of a person's culture. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
dismissive of this kind of narrative ecosystem that they are really part of. And also, like, when you like things like this, it's interesting, like possession, whatever, speaking in tongues, um
You addressed that.
penis theft, all these things. Like, the interesting thing to me about them is that they can't happen to you unless you believe in them. And if a lot of people around you also believe in them really strongly, it makes them more powerful than if, like, you're the only one that believes in them. And that's where the power of culture comes from. Like, when everybody around you believes something, or like it believes in a certain chain of events or a certain narrative or something like this, it becomes really, because of our nature as social beings, it's really hard to doubt the whatever that everybody around you thinks is true. And that's
Yeah.
kind of one of the situations we've gotten in, with the some of the divisions in America, is that we don't surround ourselves with people who have different narratives than us, and they become these kind of self-reinforcing sort of whirlpools that are impossible to get out of,
Mhm,
as
mhm,
far
absolutely.
as our beliefs go.
I also thought about this, Frank, because as we all know, the brain is an extremely powerful, part of our beings, and people like, say, uh, veterans who have lost limbs. The
Hmm.
phantom limb syndrome. I
Yeah.
believe they do call it a syndrome, right? Where people actually believe that their leg is still attached to their body, even if it's been, taken off, like, say, going over a landmine or what have you, that the
Hmm.
brain still believes, that person still believes, because of the brain, the powers of the brain, that that limb is still there and it still exists. They can feel it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
this person or persons going through this extremely powerful
Hmm.
neurological episode, an event that happens to them, it's extremely real to them, whether it's real or not to us. And respecting that
Hmm.
component, I think, is what you're trying to drive home in one of the married narrative threads that you drive home in the book. So I say to
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
give it a read.
Yeah.
It may not be.
The brain is the most complex organism or system in the universe that we know of.
Yep.
It's like,
Yep.
orders of magnitude more complex than anything that we know about. There's more neurons in the brain, I think, than cells in the universe, or stars in the universe. And maybe that's an exaggeration, because we don't know how many stars there are,
Yeah.
but in the galaxy,
Yeah.
for sure.
Hey.
It's just like, the level of complexity there is so much that it's hard to account for all the things that it does.
Yeah.
And the way that, for me, it was really interesting, is the way our beliefs, like, feed into the neurological function. There are these um conditions called functional disorders, where nothing really, like, you don't get hit on the head, but some sort of pathway becomes blocked, or disrupted or irregular or something like that, and it can cause, so many different things. Like, basically anything that the brain does, it can do wrongly. And if that pathway gets to be too firm, it can be really debilitating, and that's what a lot of people, these are called functional disorders because they're not like,
Mhm.
they don't have a external cause. They're just caused by internal malfunction, and a lot of people, a lot of people think like chronic fatigue, a lot of chronic pain, those kind of things are functional in nature, like they just
Mhm.
happen. And but your beliefs and your anxiety and those kind of things can also, to a certain extent, drive some of those symptoms, like with the Havana syndrome in Cuba. That's what most people are coming around to, the idea that this is a functional syndrome that's caused by that's sort of perpetuated by the belief in the weapon, this like secret weapon that nobody knows what it is, or how it would even work, or
Right, right,
how you would move it
right.
around. It's that's like directly analogous to the to something like penis theft or something like that. Like there's this system of, this is this narrative that's being told of like, this bad thing is happening and it's happening to me and it's having this effect, and if you believe in that strongly enough, it could kind of create that sensation or whatever. And I feel more comfortable criticizing, or not criticizing, but just saying what those processes might be, because that's something in our culture than somebody else's culture. I feel like I don't have quite as much, um it's not really my place to say,
Sure.
no, your penis is not being stolen, even though there are like Nigerian doctors who will say that. Um but the experience of having your penis stolen through magic is, terrible and real to the person who it happens to.
You know, behold the power of the brain at the end of the day.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
So,
yeah,
folks, like I said, come for the print stuff. Enter
yeah,
the world of Frank Bures through the print stuff, and dive a little deeper into
yeah.
the geography of Manus. Now,
Stay for the
I
penis
did.
thief.
Come for the print, stay for the penis thieves, right? But no, I mean, and it's much more. Obviously, the book is much more than that. So, and you should find out for yourselves all about that. You can find this book however you get your books these days, either online or a hard copy. So I recommend that book as well. And you, any new projects, anything upcoming on the horizon that you're working on that you can talk
I
about?
have a new collection of stories that of essays that I just published, called Shape of the World. It's a essays that I did for Rotary magazine,
Okay,
about some of the things that we've been talking about, but other things as
sure.
well. And then I'm also working on a new audio tour for Voice Map about Bologna, where I went to,
Oh,
where I
nice,
was an exchange student, and so I'm just putting that together, and then hopefully we'll get it all sorted out. We're going to Italy in December, and so I'm gonna try to work on that. But that was really fun to put
fantastic.
together. Yeah,
And you can find Frank's art. He's been in I don't know if I mentioned this, but you've been in Harper's Magazine, Outside, Esquire, Men's Health, Washington Post Magazine, Best American Travel Writing Anthologies. You've been published in quite a few places because of your travel experiences. So you know quite a few different spots on the globe there. Of the
yeah.
places that you visited, Frank, and have spent any time in, what it was the most compelling place for you?
That's hard to pick. I mean,
Uh,
I love
a couple
I love
places. You don't have to
I
pick
love
one.
East Africa. I love Nairobi. It's a great city.
Okay.
That's a place I could think about living, actually. Nigeria is is just an amazing country, and Lagos is just a incredible city. It's kind of one of those places people either love or hate. The energy there is just off the charts. It's just like a crazy place, but it's like I'm definitely in the I love it phase. I did another story where I took a bus across West Africa, and it was really interesting because we had a bunch of Nigerians on the bus, and it was very interesting to see how everybody else in West Africa views the Nigerians as like these kind of crazy people, and so with who are just like yeah, I don't know. It's a great country. It's an amazing country, and it's not a surprise that they Nigeria produces so many writers and musicians, and just like has all this
Mhm.
energy. I mean, it's the third or fourth, I think, most populous country in the world,
Mm.
and will
Wow.
overtake the U.S. in like 2030.
Wow.
I think.
I will talk off the air. I actually worked with a guy from Lagos, and he still has a house out there, which the cost of living there is very inexpensive. And
Yeah.
he is a character. Joseph was
Hmm.
his name. So shout out to Joseph. I haven't talked to him in quite a while though. Shout him out anyway.
Yeah.
It's some of the stories and pictures that he'd show me, some of the parties and festivals that they have on the weekends. It's just
Hmm.
like you think it's like Carnival in Rio. I mean, they kind of have that every week.
Yeah.
It seems like.
It's not like an easy place to travel, but it's, especially if you know a few people there, it's really amazing.
Wow. Well, I appreciate the time that you took out. Finally, I'm glad we got this together.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to plug?
Um,
Where can people find you online? Social
you can
media?
you can find me online at frankburris.com. I usually put all my stories on there. I'm not
Mhm.
very big on any social media. I'm sort of half-heartedly on LinkedIn. But a couple of the books that I
Got it.
used for this tour, I should mention maybe like this book, Let's Go Crazy by
Alan White.
Ann Light, is really, really good and really fun for anybody who likes Prince. And it's all about the making of Purple Rain and how that all came together.
Great
And
book.
then of course Neil's book, um,
Yep.
this thing called Life, about his kind of his relationship with Prince, basically, and a lot of stuff in there is new, and nobody, I don't think, knew before, unless you knew Neil, like that. There's a
Hmm.
whole thing about Sonny Liston, and his
Yeah, Vegas. Yep,
you
during the
know whole,
3121 residency in Rio. Yeah, he and we talked about that when we had coffee. There's a lot of stuff you can put in a book, and there's a lot of stuff you don't put in a book. And he definitely shared some very things that none of us knew about,
yeah.
but suspected. Because the
Hmm.
word on the street that he'd been you know suffering with tremendous neurological pain for many years
Hmm.
because of his hips and when he was himself was injured. That there's a It's heartbreaking, but I mean, he was human.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
he
yeah.
definitely pushed the boundaries of what it means to be motivated and driven. If anything, and your walking tour mentions that, he says the one takeaway from Prince is dreams, because that was the original title of the Purple Rain
Hmm. Hmm.
movie. That was the name of the script that he had, an
Yeah.
initial title for it. And he was able to the dreams and the manifestation of me.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
you yourself also have manifested a few dreams along the way. You got to publish this book, Geography of Madness, and you have done a few things yourself out there to manifest. So
Yeah, and
you know you
that's the great thing about Prince, is that he kind of shows, and that's what I tried to talk about in the tour, how like
Yep.
you can imagine these things that don't exist, and then but if you have to be able to imagine them and have those dreams in order to be able to make them real.
Well, I thank you again, Frank. And folks, again, if this is your first time on the discovering the podcast or discovering Frank, hit like and subscribe down below. I'll have some links for Frank's other written works and anthologies and anything else that he's willing to share. Uh, have a great rest of the year. I don't know how many more episodes I'm going to get in here before 2022 ends. But Frank, we're gonna have lunch the next time I'm out in Minneapolis. I will make we'll make it somehow. We'll make it work. Hopefully, we'll get together in the summertime next year.
But
I'm going to be at Celebration next year. I was told by a friend of mine I must go for her 50th birthday, and she's dragging me along for it. Not
yeah,
dragging me. I'm not kicking and screaming, mind you. I'm coming along. I have no choice but to come back to Minneapolis. So I'm happy about that. So
well, I look
thanks
forward to that.
again,
Let me
folks.
know.
All right. Take care, folks. Have a great rest of the week and Keep it on the 2 and 4.
All right.
All right.